Welcome to this second installment of Customer Journey Mapping with the Inside View, backed by popular demand. The last one went very well and we had a lot of requests to do it again. So here we go. Welcome Daisy, Rakia, Tracy. How's everyone doing today? Thumbs up. For those of you that don't have your video cameras on, that's okay, but also don't be shy. This is a safe space, so no judgment on anything. We're still in hard times here, so feel free to turn on your cameras if you can. My name is Lawrence Levinson, and I am a customer experience professional, sales professional, business development professional of the last 2 decades across several industries and different businesses, from banking to consumer packaged goods to testing, certification, and inspection services. I am the current chair of the Toronto CXPA, and sharing CX best practices is one of my passions. So I'm a huge fan of all things Crystal and what she's accomplished with the Inside View, and we're so happy to be joining you all today. Eunice, can you introduce yourself?
Hi, so good morning. My name is Eunice Adeyemi. I'm the managing partner of Q21 Solutions. We're an experiential marketing company in Lagos, Nigeria. I'm super excited to be on the call with Crystal and Lawrence and you guys as well. So I'm looking forward to today's call and being able to share some of our experience in Nigeria as well with you guys here.
Welcome, Eunice. And last but certainly not least, Crystal.
Hi, everyone. Welcome. My name is Crystal DeCuna. I'm the Chief Experience Officer with the Inside View, and we're happy to be hosting today's webinar for all of you CX enthusiasts. And so what I've been able to do with the Inside View over the last few years is really create a customer experience design firm that works with businesses to really ignite their leaders, excite their employees, and ultimately delight their customers by understanding what the customer journey is, and carefully crafting and curating experiences for both their internal customer and their external customer. So delighted to be able to lead this process with you guys today, and thank you everybody for being here.
Thank you, Crystal. So on an administrative side, we're going to go until 12:15 today. Again, we've done quite a few of these webinars over the last few months, and out of the feedback of each of them was participants asking for more time in the breakout rooms so that they don't feel rushed and we can get into some really engaging conversation. So that's what we're going to do today. So keep an eye on the time. We'll go till 12:15, and then we'll host a Q&A from 12:15 till 12:30 for anyone that wants to stick around. We will keep the conversation going. So we'll start with this conversation around how has your customer done business? How have your customers done business in a different way? What's changed since COVID, both internally and externally? When we talk about EX and CX, we could easily spend the next 2 hours talking about what COVID has done to business, the nature of business, journey maps for our customers and employees. But why don't we start the conversation around that?
So for us, we notice a lot that that people are really wanted to understand the external customer journey. We find that that happens most when people come and approach us and they say, you know, our customer is now changed. They're doing business with us online, over the phone, you know, just so many different ways. We're doing virtual pickups, but I also always point it back to understanding the internal customer experience, right? COVID has definitely changed what our staff and our team are going through and how they're experiencing our business and our brand. And to be able to have those loyal advocates as customers, we need to make sure that we have loyal advocates through our employees as well. So, you know, curious, I've got Daisy, Rakia, Sarah, Joe, is it Joy? Joy and Tracy on the call. Tell us a little bit about some of the challenges that maybe you've been going through when it comes to COVID and internal and external customer experiences. Not all at once, just one at a time.
And welcome to the kitten that just poked its side face in. That was rotation.
Eunice, tell us a little bit about your team. Now, I know you've been working really remotely.
Yeah, I mean, and for us, it's changed drastically, right? So experiential marketing is more face-to-face engagement, really touchy-feely. And now with this, we've kind of been on lockdown. So everything's gone virtual. So we've had to change a lot of how we engage with our customers and even with ourselves. I mean, internally, we haven't seen each other in the last 6 months. So that's been very traumatic. I mean, these are people that we see every day, right, internally. And my external clients are just like, wow, this is, how do we do this? And how does our business move forward? How would we be able to engage? So it's been tough. It's really been tough to adjust to this new COVID era as it is.
Right. And, that takes us to design thinking. I know, Lawrence, you're an expert at design thinking, and that's really about what this is about, carefully designing these experiences, right?
Absolutely. So as a reminder to all of you on the line, you've probably heard of design thinking before. Potentially, some of you have spent a lot of time immersed in it and have executed on exercises built around its principles. But just for those of you that are new to it, just remember design thinking is a methodology, and journey mapping, which is what we're here to talk about today, is a tool in that toolkit. And so, for amazing examples of companies that leverage design thinking as part of their core strategies, think of Google, think of GE, think of Samsung, think of Apple. If any of you have a product or work with a service that just completely wows and amazes you, there's a very good chance that it was created through a methodology built around design thinking principles. And so here's just a quick snapshot of the process itself. Starting with empathy. It all starts with empathy and looking at problems from the customer or user's perspective versus our own or our organizations. Or often when we approach problem solving, we look at what has been done before, right? Which is the complete antithesis of design thinking and empathy. So, the first thing to do is start with a whiteboard and say, okay, what's the problem? Who's the user? What are the emotions that user's feeling? How much effort is that user required to get through the steps? And how do we ultimately give them the success that they're looking for? That leads to defining the problem, putting some concepts together around strategy, and then you start to ideate to say, all right, well, what are some solutions that may or may not work? And again, this is where no constraints should exist. This is the idea of, with $1 billion budget, how would you solve this problem? And start with that kind of free thinking in mind, as opposed to feeling very locked into solution mode. And then from there, once you have a bunch of ideas, prototype them. And you see prototypes out in the world. I was down by the beaches in Toronto over the weekend, and I saw a gentleman with a prototype of a foldable kayak that he took out of his backpack, opened up, and was testing it out in the water to see if it worked. So that leads to the final step of test. So, we're not going to get much deeper than that today, but again, just keep in mind that journey mapping is a process. There are several ways to approach it. And, again, it all starts with the customer journey, not our own journey. And we can repeat that over and over again, but it's actually much harder to think from the shoes of the customer, looking at businesses and processes from the outside in versus the inside out. And this is where this exercise really helps customers, to have their perspective shone and have the light on them from their own shoes, from their own minds, to bring it back to your business and perspective on how you can best accommodate them. So very quickly, just here's the steps of the journey mapping process. From the start, brand awareness. And this is something that people often forget as well, in that the customer journey doesn't start when someone walks into your store or calls your business or engages with your website. It goes back several steps to, when was that brand first, becoming something that they were aware of in their minds. For many businesses, this could be a job fair, the first time someone interacts with your brand. It could be an advert. There's, countless examples of where that awareness stage comes from. But the point being, the journey starts with the impressions left on the customer at that stage. Then they may or may not develop an interest from that point, positively or negatively, which will eventually lead to a purchase. And then, of course, the cycle doesn't end there, as in they bought, because now you need to retain them as a client. And companies that do this very, very well turn retained customers into advocates And, you know, you have promoters out in the world that are loyal to the brand that want to tell their friends and family how much they love X, Y, or Z. And that's what success really looks like. So from there, I'm going to pass it to Crystal, who has a lovely story in the hospitality industry of these principles applied.
Thank you. Thanks, Lawrence. And that's just it. It's a visual. The customer journey mapping is really that visual that we get to see. We get to have an opportunity to get our ideas out and get kind of thinking a little bit differently and get creative. And so the first thing I could think of in customer journey mapping, I've been really fortunate to have a lot of really cool experiences happen to me over the years. I don't know if it's because of my industry or just because I get lucky, but I want to tell you a story about the Hilton in Jaipur, India. And so my son and his best friend and I, along with our family, traveled to India 2 years ago during the holidays, during Christmas. It was a big trip. We did 10 cities in 30 days. It was a pretty exciting trip. And one of the places we stopped in was Jaipur. And Jaipur is known to be a very rich and Mughal area. It's, you know, they still have a queen and they still have a king. They still have the royal family kind of emperor is still kind of overarching the city. It's known as the Pink City because they have beautiful pink sand, and the buildings are actually made of like a pink clay. So it's got a lot of rich history. And so when we went to Jaipur, we were driving from Delhi to Jaipur. And if you've ever traveled in kind of remote places like that, those journeys can be pretty tiring and long. We had our whole family with us. So there was about 12 or 13 of us in a kind of one of those big SUV bus type of things. And so it was about midnight, and we were still a good hour and a half away from our hotel. So I decided to call the hotel and let them know that we're running a little bit behind. And so when I called the hotel, I said, you know, this is our party. We should be arriving at about 1:32 in the morning. They said, absolutely, you know, Mr. Kuna, we're excited to have you. We'll see you then. And so as we pulled up, right when we pulled up to the front of the hotel, there was 4 gentlemen standing with their beautiful turbans and beautifully dressed in white, like guards, just waiting to greet us at 2 in the morning, waiting to greet all of us. And so it wasn't that they came running out when we got there. They were waiting there for us, which was it was almost magical when you're pulling in you felt so special at 2 o'clock in the morning. So then we came in, and the check-in process was phenomenal. So they separated us into the 2 groups. My aunt and uncle went on one side with their kids, and myself and my son and his friend went in with another gentleman. And they just let us. They said, come on in, welcome. And they didn't take us to the checkout desk. What typically happens when you check into a hotel? Right? What typically happens is you go to the desk, you spend another 20 minutes giving your credit card information and all that jazz. Well, this didn't happen in this case. The gentleman greeted us by name and led us to the elevator, and he had a clipboard with him. And I said, don't I need to check in? He goes, we've taken care of that for you. You just need to sign here. Come on in and let us take you to your room. So we get up to our room, and you can imagine my son he was 15 at the time, and his best friend was 15 at the time. We walk into the room and we see custom-made pillows. So you can see one said Mr. James, and the other one said Mr. Zurich. That's my son's name. And I mean, these boys' face just lit up. You know, they walk in and they see their name on a bed. Now, I've never stayed at this hotel before. It's a Hilton brand. I typically, at that time, I'm still a bit of a Sheraton Marriott girl, but, you know, I hadn't stayed at Hilton throughout the whole trip. And so how did they find out my son's name and my son's best friend's name? Right. But, you know, the power of social media, I can't imagine it was too difficult for them to do that. But they did. And so the boys jump on the bed, and, you know, they're excited. And the person that brought us up to the room was lovely and said, we hope you enjoy. And then just as the boys turned around, remember, this is 2 o'clock in the morning, just as they turned around, there was a cake on the table with a note that said, so on the cake, it said, welcome to the Pink City. And then there was a little note beside it that said, and our restaurant is closed. Please enjoy this chocolate cake. There's milk in the fridge for you, as well as some extra snacks if you're hungry this evening. So like just the forethought in them understanding that, you know, it is 2 a.m. and we are probably hungry, and what a great treat for 2 young boys is a chocolate cake. I mean, he cut into it before I could even take a picture of it. It was it was pretty fast. And then going one step further, as a gentleman kind of showed me the room, they upgraded our room at 2 a.m. I didn't have to ask; they just did it. As I kind of turned the corner, there was a bathtub full of hot water. So I don't know how how they did that, but it was super hot water with beautiful rose petals. And then there was actually a glass with like sparkling water on the side as well, and a little note that said, "You've had a long journey, please rest and enjoy." Right, so the thoughtfulness of every element of my journey was really something they were thinking about. So, you know, yes, it might have taken them a little bit of pre-planning to do the pillows, but you know, my question to all of you is, you know, how much does this experience really cost them? You know, I always say, if money or time is no object, what would you do to create a memorable customer experience? And so, okay, in North America, it might be a little bit costly to get some, you know, pillows embroidered, but there's all sorts of little ways we can get around that. The cake, well, their restaurant was closed, so perhaps it was a cake, you know, that they didn't go through, or maybe they did make it special for us. It really doesn't matter, but the cost of the cake would be pretty minimal. And then, you know, the thoughtfulness of them just saying, okay, their car just pulled in, let's get somebody up there to fill up the tub for them, right? Flower petals perhaps left from the day before. So it's money or time doesn't necessarily mean it doesn't necessarily cost money or time to create those memorable customer experiences. And 2 years later, I'm still talking about this, and I can tell you I've probably shared this story over 100, if not more times in the last 2 years. So it's really a concept of understanding what needs to be to really get in the customer's mind and get in the customer's shoes, but also that the staff has the autonomy to make these decisions, and that the team has the creative power and the opportunity to think of some things that we can do to be able to create these memorable experiences for people. And so that leads me to kind of what are the outcomes. Sorry, one second here. What are the benefits of customer journey mapping? And so when I think of the benefits, number one is connecting sales, marketing, and operations, right? Clearly, I've stayed at multiple Hilton brand hotels since that experience. And it's really because they've connected. They connected emotionally with me, which is now translated into sales for them. Understanding who your customer is and what they need. Somehow they knew I needed to rest my feet after a journey of 7 hours in a bus. You're gonna need to be able to rest your feet, and so they clearly took the time to understand, okay, these boys are going to be hungry, let's make sure there's some food for them. And I'd be remiss not to mention the fact that my aunt and uncle in the room next door, the room a couple doors down, had equally as good of an experience as I did. They didn't get the embroidered pillows, but they got the food, they got the personal cards, they got bathrobes, the whole 9 yards. So number 3 would be creating and nurturing an emotional connection. Again, this is journey mapping. When we start to map out and visualize the experience that people are going through, we can literally tell moments of truth, where we can create some moments of emotional connection for our customer. So that process of visualizing their journey is so critical in that. Otherwise, you're kind of trial and error in creating emotional connections. Identifying moments of truth and adjusting. So here's the thing with moments of truth, is they can sometimes be heightened and they can sometimes be not so great. And so we need to be able to make sure that we can adjust. And when you're able to have that visual representation of their journey, you can adjust before you have to.
Crystal, can I add one point there?
Absolutely.
Because the 3 and 4 tie in so well with each other. And when you think of how we're wired psychologically, is to remember the beginning and ends of things. So Crystal focused a lot on the beginning. When you first walk into a hotel, if the business is aware of your journey and your emotional journey, they'll be totally understanding when you show up to that front desk being cranky, and their job is to help you not be cranky. And businesses that totally miss this, and I'm sure you could all have tons of examples, is when you show up and they're 10 times crankier back. And you're like, man, I will remember this forever and I will never stay here again.
Yeah, that's you hit the nail on the head. Now we're using a hospitality example, but my friend, it really, it really doesn't matter what your product service is, because it's understanding that journey in every type of business. Right now I've just being home during COVID, we've done a lot of home renovations, and I'm sure a lot of people can share in this with me. We're shopping from Lowe's, we're shopping from Canadian Tire, we're shopping from Home Depot. I literally pull up to Home Depot and they loaded my car with the bricks of cement, the gravel bags, and the cement blocks I needed to keep a couple things up. I mean, I didn't have to pick up anything. I didn't have to do any work. Everything was brought to my car and loaded in my car for me. Why would I ever not do, why would I do anything else going forward? Because it's a new standard, right? They've literally been able to kind of understand the journey that people are going on now in this COVID world, and adjust and adapt to that as well. All right, so and predicting behaviors and getting ahead of expectations. So this is that Disney magic moments, memorable moments. This is the Apple experience. Has anybody ever tried to open up a cartridge of ink lately? Ink cartridge, hands up if you've tried to open an ink cartridge, right? And you're like ripping it apart, and it is like Fort Knox to try to open an ink cartridge. Mind you, and on the other hand, you get an Apple product and it is like seamlessly beautiful to open. Every tab, every pull tab, all the plastic fits perfectly. It's an experience just to open it, and it's not frustrating. It's a pleasure to open those things. So predicting the behaviors and getting ahead of your customers' expectations, in my hotel example, was clearly the case. But think of any type of business, whether you're an online business, whether you're selling a product or service, it's all relevant to making sure that you're just thinking a few steps ahead. All right, so as we're designing customer journey maps, the number one place to really start as you're going through the design thinking process is understanding exactly who your ideal customer persona is. So for example, chances are that hotel in particular gets a lot of people that are doing that long journey from Delhi to Jaipur, 7-8 hours. And so they kind of probably understand that people are tired, people are uncomfortable, people are cranky. We need this process to be quick for them. And so getting clear on your ideal customer persona is more important now than it's ever been before. And so these are just 3 examples of personas that we've designed for a couple of different companies. But so for example, this is the Yen family, an extended family. They have a couple extra family members in their home, brands that are really important to them. You learn a lot about the brand that's important to people. Are they a Samsung or are they an Apple? And so you really start to identify what's important to that particular person when you can start to understand that the brands that they purchase, the pain points that they go through, the frustrations, some of the ways they like to be marketed to, and motivation. So I would suggest, and we'll put templates of this in our CX Solutions Facebook group for you guys to dive in a little bit deeper. But this is a great place for you to start, in this particular place, the Jenkin family. So perhaps, a retired couple, they like that quality experience. Expedia, they like to travel. Hilton, Callaway, so they're golfers. Lancome, so she uses a high-end cosmetic brand. So you just kind of get to learn a little bit more about the person. So designing that persona and really being able to get into the head of the customer, get into the mind and kind of what their expectations already are, that is so, so critical. Lawrence, I know you've done a lot of work on persona design. Anything to add to this?
I would say to remember that everything is evolving and changing. So yes, to Crystal's story earlier, some of you on the line may have been very excited at the thought of soaking your feet in a hot bath with rose petals, and others may have been like, that's just like a waste of time or money. So this is where persona development becomes very important, as at the end of the day, expectations are very personal and everyone has their own set. And companies that do this well break it down to as close to the individual as possible. And you can't get there if you don't have personas. So I'd say collect as much data as possible and recognize that an expectation 3 months ago may be different today. As in, I used to love all kinds of things that, by watching companies get it wrong throughout the last 6 months, I no longer care for. And, we all evolve and change over time. So the journeys change with us. And this is a constant process that needs to be refreshed over time.
Yeah, before I move on, I'll also ask Eunice. I know, Eunice, you do a lot, like this is something you're going to dive into in just a moment, but how important is the persona in your world, designing that ideal persona?
So, I mean, it's very critical because we're designing it actually for two sets. For us, it's for our immediate client, and then it's also for their customers. So, we have to go a step further in understanding what's the persona of the individual that's purchasing our client's products. So it's key, and there's nothing we can do beyond that. And like Lawrence has said, things have changed over the last 6 months in terms of us having to actually really dive deeper and understand what people's personas are and what the expectations are, because they are totally different.
Mm-hmm. And I think a lot of businesses, I shouldn't say I think, I definitely know a lot of small, medium businesses in particular, COVID has put so many different challenges up for us that we're kind of just moving and making sure our doors are open and our lights are on, but not taking that step back and saying, okay, wait a minute. Let's get clear on who our customer is, what they need from us right now. There's an acronym I use, it's called WINNIE, which is what's important now intuition. And so what's important now for that customer is what's going to make that difference. So when you can start to understand that single Sally in the middle here, these are the channels that she likes to be communicated with. And these are the things that are important to her. And this is what she needs right now in this moment. Then you can start to get ahead of how you can improve her experience, how she can purchase more from you, how she can be a raving fan of yours, how she might even be able to work for your brand, right? So it just depends on really getting clear on that, which is going to lead me to, we'll put these templates in the CX solution. They're just a few things for you to start working through this process and designing your ideal customer persona. So we'll put these templates available for you after the webinar as well. But I want to tell you a quick story about an MRI machine, and this comes to us courtesy of Oracle. For those of you in the design thinking world, this is not a new journey map, but I think it's a really relevant, great example. So there was a gentleman named Doug. He was an engineer of MRI machines, and his goal was to save people's lives through technology and really understand how MRIs were going to be able to benefit people's health. And so, he couldn't understand why so many people were always so fearful of these MRI machines that were life-saving, right? Really able to identify kind of where your medical challenges were. And so it was a little mind-boggling to him. So he decided to go and follow the journey of little Sophia. Little Sophia was, she went to the doctor. And so follow me here on this green path. So little Sophia went to the doctor, and the doctor said, listen, we need to get you to the hospital because we need to get an MRI done. And little Sophia is 6 years old. And so when that happens, her mom is a little bit worried, but she goes to the hospital, she checks in, she walks into the MRI machine room, and she sees the machine. And so what's a little 6-year-old going to do when they see an MRI machine? Typically, cry, perhaps resist. Then she has to wait and see the doctor, because maybe the doctor needs to calm her down. Perhaps they give her a bit of a sedative to make sure that she's comfortable. And then eventually she goes to the MRI. But what happens is, what we start to do in the journey mapping process is we map out the on stage and the backstage people and things that are involved at every element of that journey. So when you're doing this on your own, if you decide to do it on your own, the check-in process. Okay, so on stage is everything that little Sophia can see, and backstage is everything that she can't see, but that affects her overall experience. So in this case, the nurse is somebody she can see the imaging tech. She can see the computer on the desk, like that front foyer area, perhaps some charts. The back end stuff that she can't see, but definitely affects her patient experience, patient records, maybe the admin team. Doug back here, that MRI engineer, he's part of the people that she can't see. And so when you're doing this for your business, your product, your service, or even your employee experience, you start to really be able to see, okay, what are the things that are important in terms of people and things for both on stage and off stage. But my favorite part here is this yellow line, and this is the emotions. And so you're able to map out, that's actually the last part that you do when you're mapping out. So first you design your ideal persona. you design the green journey, and then as a collective, as your entire organization, you get together and you start to map out the people, the things, the people and the things for on stage and off stage. Once that's all complete, the last stage is to start to map out this emotional experience. And so when she walks in, you know, oh my gosh, I'm a little nervous. That machine looks really scary. Will I get hurt? You know, mom, can my mom help me? And perhaps she starts to get a little, you know, loud and boisterous. And then what does that do? What does that affect the experience of the people in the waiting room, right? It delays the process a little bit. So when you think about money and time, if this little Sophia is upset and crying, and a nurse and a doctor have to spend 45 minutes calming her down, perhaps giving her a sedative, all that takes money and time. Where if we could create a better experience, then you're shifting that money and time so that it's a pleasant experience after. Because even when she gets the MRI, what's that memory going to be like, right? That memory is certainly not one that any mom would want to kind of keep and remember. And so as you start to identify these moments of truth, you start to say, okay, well, this is where kind of things go a little haywire. And this is where we can start to create a better experience. And so how do we want little Sophia to feel? Well, instead of it being looking scary, we want her to feel safe. And this is where the ideation comes in from the design thinking is, okay, let's put our heads together and think of where do kids feel safe? And in this example, we used, you know, perhaps going camping, or it could be that she felt safe at Disney, or she feels safe with princesses, or, I mean, it could be anything, right? But in this example, we use camping. And there's a great book called Driven to Delight. It's the story of the Mercedes, how they kind of use journey mapping to create the Mercedes experience. So, and in that, they kind of really focus on these moments of truth, like when you purchase your vehicle, when you leave with your vehicle, all those little moments of truth and how they want you to feel at every element. And it was really important for them, and in this case as well, but to involve every level of their organization, from the janitorial staff to the presidents of the individual company, individual branches. They wanted everybody to be able to be involved in that journey mapping process. So once everybody's involved, you know, it's so amazing how many different opinions you're going to get, because, you know, that frontline staff will have a very different input in the mapping process than a senior level executive would. So that takes us to, again, this moment of truth here. So we can see that this is where it gets very emotional, because she's nervous throughout here, but this is kind of that identifying moment of truth. And you start to put a line through here, and then you start to see, okay, what are the people and the processes involved in this particular experience, and how can we adjust, and how can we tweak, and how can we make better? Maybe it's, you know, can we make sure that we have a nurse that's highly emotionally connected and that's, you know, going to distract the little girl to make sure that, you know, she's having fun? Can we make sure that the MRI actually visually looks a little bit different? And so once you're able to identify this experience, it allows you to be able to transform, you know, Doug's life-changing MRI machine to an experience that little Sophia will remember forever, right? So now when she walks into an MRI machine, you know, her attention is totally distracted from the actual process that she's going into, but instead she's looking at the beautiful bright colored flowers, she's looking at Tigger and Winnie the Pooh, and it's created an experience for her. And so that's, you know, that's that transition, but it's a journey mapping process that allows you to do that. Now, let me ask you all a quick question, and just feel free to shout out. How much money do you think something like this cost? Do you think this was an expensive process in terms of designing that final experience? Hands up. Anybody? Not all at once? You know, it couldn't have costed too much, right? To really wrap an MRI machine and make sure that there's a mural up there. So it's a graphic mirror. It's something that just, it's a pretty inexpensive process to be able to look at how much it's actually saving them in the long run from not having to waste that extra time in the MRI machine in the waiting room, right? And so this particular hospital actually designed multiple rooms that have this kind of experience for, I believe they have a princess room, I believe they have a spa room. So they've really made sure that, okay, for particular clients or particular patients, they wanted to make the experience resonate for everybody.
Well,
so I hope that, Go ahead, Lawrence.
In this case, GE partnered with Disney to create the Disney Adventure series. So Disney would have covered the cost of advertising their brand and getting
Yeah,
it.
I'm sure.
Yeah, for sure, for sure.
Beautiful idea.
So just give you a couple of resources now to also use. So these are a couple of resources that that we've been using so far. So 3 tools that you might want to look into when you start to map out your journey mapping. And there's tons more. So if none of these work for you, just connect with us and we're happy to kind of share a couple. There's Smaply, which allows you to map out that journey. Mural, I've been using quite a bit. Actually, I just started using it not too long ago, but really great and interactive ways to kind of get your ideas on the board. And Lawrence, I know you use Google Jamboard as well. So the idea is being able to visualize the experience, because when you're just going on reports or surveys, it's very hard to identify from a survey what that moment of truth is, right? And so that's the beauty of journey mapping is you can clearly identify where the challenge is and where the great, that, you know, one of the maps we did with somebody, they were just thinking of taking out, this was a home builder actually, they were thinking of removing one of the letters that they sent to home buyers in their process because they thought nobody really read it. Well, when we started to map out the process, that letter was what saved so many other things, what created a great experience in so many other ways. They were trying to think of cost-cutting measures and really, is it relevant, is it necessary? But in the long term, when we mapped out the journey, sending people that letter to let them know, hey, it's summertime and you need to do this, this, and this in your house, really ultimately created great experiences for customers. All right, so that's it for me. I'm going to hand it over to Eunice, and she's going to share an exciting story with you as well. Eunice?
All right, thanks, Crystal. So the truth about it is very funny when you mentioned the book in regards to Mercedes-Benz, right? I read that a couple of weeks ago, and what stuck out most was the whole lead, which was, you know, listen, emphasize, add value, and delight. And we do these things, but we don't realize that we're actually doing them. And it's so critical to our businesses and our general interaction with our customers. So I'm going to use a quick example of Coca-Cola. So Coca-Cola is one of our clients. They've been our clients for the last 6 years. And one would think that as experiential marketers, you know, what does journey mapping have to do with anything, right? And really, what's the point behind it? Because after all you're doing is running an event. That's what people would think. However, we went a step further and we thought that it was really important for us to be able to create the journey, not only for our client Coca-Cola, but also for their own customers as well, because it's really important. And so we drew out a plan in terms of awareness, orientation, consideration, purchase, consumption, evaluation, and then touch points. For us, it was important that we understood what the awareness was. So where were their billboards? What were their ads looking like? How were they interacting with their customers? And this is all for us to be able to put together an event, mind you. And then the orientation. So how do people, what do people think about when they drink Coca-Cola? What's the orientation of drinking Coca-Cola? And you don't think about it very much because, I mean, it's a soda after all. You think it's just soda, but I mean, now they have different lines. They've got juice, they've got dairy products as well. You know, the temperature of Coca-Cola is also really important at the end of the day. Most people don't think about those things, but our client, who is Coca-Cola, is thinking about that. So when we're doing an event for them, we've got to think about what is the orientation for the customer who's coming to that event, and how do we connect with that orientation? And then consideration. So when you're considering which soda to actually drink or which water beverage to drink, because Coca-Cola also makes water. And then which juice to drink. How do you make those decisions? What is your consideration for that? And then purchasing. So what is it just about price? For some people, it's not about price, it's about taste. I gave this example once in terms of they had one of their senior directors only drinks Diet Coke, and that's all he drinks. And so when we're running an event, we've got to make sure that we have Diet Coke available for him for literally every 15 minutes. His Diet Coke is finished. And we had to put that into consideration when we were doing the event, because for him, that's a part of his overall experience. That would actually help him to be able to connect with, did he enjoy himself at this event? Because his practice and his consumption is based on his every 15 minutes drinking Diet Coke. And then we had others that drank Coke Zero and it had to be a certain temperature. And then you had some that only drank Eva water. And we had to make sure that we understood each person who was in that room's consumption orientation, and then evaluation. So for us, it's, you know, evaluating the entire process. How do you go about evaluating the engagement with not just the product itself, but also the experience that you're coming to the event to get. You know, what is it that we're trying to we're not necessarily selling each time you come to an experiential event. We're also just trying to educate as well. And so we need to be very mindful in terms of how are they going to evaluate. And then the touch points. So touch points are very different, and it's different for different countries as well. In Nigeria, we have multiple touch points. We've got touch points that are in the street. So for instance, they sell drinks on the street in Nigeria. Whereas here in Toronto, you know, you'd get them selling them at the corner store, and different corner stores sell them at different prices, if you actually notice, right? Or you can go to a shop, and, you know, Walmart sells it totally different from what Shoppers Drug Mart would sell. And so we've got to be very mindful of the touch points as well. So when we're actually having an event. And so if you go to the next slide, Crystal, this was an amazing event that we actually helped them put together. Which was recently, where they actually did a merger with Chi. And so Chi actually does 100% juice, and they do their dairy products. And we had to think of a way of bringing to life the actual juices that are 100%. If you're a Coca-Cola fan, you think of them just doing sodas alone. And now, as a brand, they now have introduced drinks. This is obviously in Nigeria. They now introduce juice into their array of products. And so for us, we had to bring the concept of juice to life within this, and then also bring to the concept the dairy. And so what we did is we actually created, if you notice to the left, there's images of real fruit. So we brought real fruit in. And we created this fruit area, and within that fruit area, you could taste fruit, you could engage with the elements, you could actually understand what it tastes. The taste was different. We had brand promoters that were there that could walk you through the experience of what it would be like to actually drink one of the new apple juices. And then we did a comparison test with our Coca-Cola product, apple juice, and then our competitors in the market, obviously not naming their names, but we did one of those tests so people could taste the difference, right? And that all went to the experience. And then we created a farm for the dairy products, because after all, I mean, come on, think about it. The closest thing that you can link with dairy is a farm. Unfortunately, we couldn't bring in a cow because it was in an event center, but we brought in live hay. We did a makeshift farm as well for them. And then we now got them to taste the dairy products that we now had. So from the different yogurts that they now have on the brand. And the whole idea was we needed to bring it back to the experience and create that journey for the people coming into the room. And our stakeholders were different. We had customers in the room. We had the new partners from Chi, which is the company that they merged with, in the room. We also then had the Coca-Cola staff in the room as well. And so we had to figure out, how do we then bring this journey of us coming together as one company into a room and then create an experience around it. And it was amazing because we had to use a lot of the touch points that you talked about within the actual journey mapping, and figure out, okay, what's most important to the individuals coming into the room? What's the experience they're going to lead with? How do we then ensure that we make sure that everybody who's come into this room have had really a unique experience, and they understand clearly what the product is all about. Thank goodness at the end of the day, I mean, it was amazing. The reviews were awesome, more so from our customer perspective, which is Coca-Cola, but then also from a buy-in perspective. So they got to have a lot of new distributors sign on as well. So for us, that was winning points for them as well. So over the last little while, we've learned a lot in terms of making sure that we're listening, we're basically able to connect with them. Adding value is also really important. It's not just about making sure that you are there and you're present, but what value are you adding to the system as well? And then delighting. I mean, delighting goes hand in hand with making sure that you add value. So I'm really glad I was able to share this experience with Coca-Cola, and just, I mean, this is one of the many clients we have, but this is just showing how you can bring journey mapping into just even creating an event, because people don't think that you actually need it, but you do need it in order to be able to reach your customers at the end of the day.
That's a great example. Great example. And that's just it, is making sure, thank you for sharing that with us, Eunice.
Oh, no worries.
And that's just it, is really understanding from a customer perspective, understanding every element that they're going through. But I loved how you talked about how it translates into the financial side of it, right? Because when you're talking to CEOs and when you're talking to the stakeholders, they want to know that financial gain. And when you create an experience, people are 70% more likely to buy from a brand if they feel that they had a memorable experience. 70% more likely. I mean, anybody that knows me knows I'm a Starbucks fan, and I'm the crazy girl that bought the $100 Starbucks Swarovski cup because I'm a fan, right? Like, do I really need a coffee cup that's worth $100? Well, it had crystals on it, so I bought it, right? And so it's about people pay more for an experience that they can relate to and that they love and enjoy.
Yeah, I mean, think about the example that you just gave about the Hilton, right? The hotel. So you had an experience, and from that experience, it literally changed how you actually even engage with the brand, because you never used to really engage with the brand a lot. And then now you've even brought the brand to this platform. So imagine how many people you've now touched with just that one experience. And that's what you're trying to do every time you engage with your customers.
Yeah, and I'll take it back even further, and I deal a lot with that internal customer. For us, it's igniting leaders, exciting employees, and delighting customers. And so I bring it back. We don't do enough of really delighting and understanding what that internal customer experience is like. How are we hiring them? How are we onboarding them? What's the experience that they're having with us in their first 21 days, in their first 3 months, in their first 90 days, making sure that, really understanding that our external customer is something that we pay attention to a lot of, but I think it's really important to bring it back, because without that raving fan mentality from an internal perspective, it's very, very hard to be able to create those raving fans from an internal perspective. So not something you had an opportunity to touch on too much, Eunice, but I know how engaged you are with your team. And I think that plays a really big part in it, is because they're all passionately involved in creating kind of that process, right? Okay, so let's break out into breakout rooms, and so we've got a question that we'd like to pose to you. Let me just share my screen real quick. A question that we'd like to pose to you that we hope you've taken away some really great tips and techniques from customer journey mapping, but even more important for us to be able to discuss it. And this is the interactive part of the breakout session. And so I'm just going to share my screen right now so that you can see my questions. Perfect. All right, so as I break you into breakout rooms, you're going to get a request that's going to say, could you join a breakout room? And these are the 2 questions, and Noah will actually also put these in the chat for us. But what areas of your business would you like to journey map? So now that we've talked a little bit about the many ways you can, taking a look at your particular business, what are the areas that you'd like to deep dive into a little bit more? And then what outcomes would you be looking to gain from a customer journey map? Is it financial? Is it, the growth of your team, a development of culture, higher sales, better customer satisfaction ratings? Tell us a little bit more about, now that we've intrigued you on journey mapping, what are the outcomes that you'd really like to see in your business? So as we put you into breakout rooms, I'll ask everybody to assign a leader when you get to the breakout room. And so the person with the birthday closest to today, if you can be the leader in your group and kind of spearhead the discussion, it'd be great if you're able to turn on your cameras. If not, that's okay. But the person with the birthday closest to today, please spearhead the conversations. And let's just start having these discussions on what type of outcomes and how you'd like to use journey mapping in your business. So without further ado, you're going to get a request in just a moment from me. All right, we'll see you back here in about 10 minutes, everybody. Hi, everyone. If you just want to unmute your mic, that would be great. Noah, you're good to post that in there?
That'd be good.
Sure. Well, Daisy was on last webinar for the customer journey mapping, right, Daisy?
This is my first customer journey mapping.
Oh, I thought you're on. You've been on a couple. So, what were your thoughts on the areas of your business you'd like to journey map? I know you're starting that. That's an app or a website for other realtors.
So it would be essentially a software as a service.
Yep.
Companies, but also for
schools and stuff like that. We'll focus mostly on the corporate audience though for this particular thing that we're working on.
Okay. And have you guys ever explored these tools before, or is this new for you?
We've done it a little bit before, but really sort of a bit more on the fly, and really looking to dig into that more intentionally this time.
Okay, very good. Intentionally, that's the key word.
Exactly.
Yeah. Thank you. Shikoni? Not sure if they're there. Rakia? No? Okay. How about yourself, Noah? Are there any journeys within businesses you see today that you think would be a good idea to map out through a journey mapping session?
I can use an example from a past life in pharma. It was kind of like Eunice was saying, because there's actually two similar but separate journeys and customers that you have to kind of map out if you want to market towards them, right?
Right.
So you're not only marketing towards doctors to prescribe, but you're also marketing towards the patient or whoever's taking the meds, right? So my role was less centered on that. It was more like pharmacists and just the general public, because it was just CPG, over the counter cough and cold medicine.
Right.
So it was just interesting, and we mapped out like how so our medicine was used to target coughs and colds and stuff very early on, and to actually like attack the virus rather than just manage your symptoms once you're already suffering from the cold. So we mapped out like the whole customer journey and how to target them and stuff like that. So it was pretty cool.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Shikoni or Rakia, are either of you back with us? No? Okay, so I'll go through an example. I used to work in the testing, inspection, and certification space, and one of the biggest revelations for me, which tied overall to customer journey mapping as a methodology, was parking, and how important parking is to the customer journey. And so the business I was in at the time, customers are engineers, environmental engineers, realtors, anyone that's poking holes in the ground to quantify and assess what's in the ground. And so they're dropping off samples and coolers at labs throughout the country. And I think if you were to ask back at that time, 5 years ago, anyone in the operations group, when does the customer journey start, or when does our responsibility to the customer start? The answer would always have been, well, when they show up at the counter. No one thinks of, well, what was their experience walking in, let alone what was their experience pulling up and parking and so on. And, it was a very heavily health and safety based culture. That was kind of the critical absolute of the organization. And so what happens is there's not enough parking spots for employees, let alone customers at that point in time. And so, you could imagine, to journey map a customer and picture them sitting in traffic, because labs typically sit near airports, which are typically near highways, so that people get samples on and off of airplanes coming from remote areas. And so they're not conveniently located to often where most of the customers themselves are. And so they have to get on the road and sit in traffic, and they're tired and they're cranky, and they finally get to the location, and then, they can't find a parking spot. So, they get upset, they get angry, they double park, throw their four-ways on, hop out, which is now creating a hazard. And there's been some examples of things that didn't go well from there. So in journey mapping, we saw at the time just how critically important that component was to whether or not a customer will literally choose to buy from us, because our competitors at the time had very spacious parking lots and coffee machines and treats. So they're thinking, okay, well, you're on the road, you're tired, you're cranky, pull into a nice big spot, come inside, we'll give you a cold, you know, mango juice or whatever it is, some type of beverage, or a hot coffee if it's the winter, and that kind of thing. And you know, it was regarded as silly. You know, look at what our competitors are doing. It's so silly. We're focused on our core business, but in fact, we're losing business because we're not paying attention to the customer's needs, right? And so we created a program called On the Go, which really I drew inspiration from Loblaws has a click and collect program. And so I effectively said, let's do exactly the same thing. We painted 4 parking spots, VIP, on brand with the colors of the logo. We put a little sign up with a phone number and said, you know, pull up to the spot, dial this phone number. Someone will be out from sample reception, either with a coffee and a newspaper if you need to wait for their bottles to be prepared, or to empty out your coolers from your truck. You don't even need to get out. And this was pre-COVID. And, you know, back to Crystal's point earlier around costs, we needed to buy 2 cans of paint and some people's time to paint the spots. We already had a cell phone sitting in a drawer somewhere from an employee that left a long time ago. You know what I mean? You have these resources lying around. So it was a really low cost creative idea. Of course, success now hinges on setting the expectation that when that phone rings, someone answer it. But outside of that, you know, these are the very small, thoughtful things that you can do that really change the overall customer experience, that lead to literally more business. And, you know, I shop at Loblaws today because of their click and collect program. And again, this goes back way beyond COVID. So I've been doing that for 3 years. As someone who formerly lived in Calgary, which had plenty of space and big grocery stores and, you know, not a lot of people, to coming to Toronto, where you're like taking your life into your own hands. Every time you go grocery shopping, people are honking horns, and you get in and the aisles are tight, and, you know, God forbid you stop at a cheese section and think, I wonder what kind of cheese I want today, because you're now clogging the artery of the line and people are getting frustrated with you. So these type of initiatives really go a long way.
Did you see what Shikoni's been posting in the chat?
No. Oh, I'm having trouble with my mic. "3D designs. Sometimes it can be challenging to make someone understand the effectiveness and usefulness of it." For sure. Whenever you're designing anything and you're using something to tell a story, right, you need to bring all the pieces together through the story. And this is where, you know, storytelling is kind of a buzzword right now. Everyone's calling themselves a storyteller now on LinkedIn, but it is a critically important skill of any successful initiative. So, you know, all these things that we're talking about today, if we can't wrap the story around where it's going to lead an organization to be stronger, right, then great ideas often fall flat just for a lack of being able to connect those dots. You know, the first person that may have said at Loblaws, why don't we create a program where people can click online and pay us $5 and we'll go collect their order for them? You know, if that wasn't, I'm sure there had to have been a lot of internal selling for that program to come to fruition, as all of them do, right? You know, the Doug Dietz GE Disney adventure story with the MRI machine, I'm pretty sure that wasn't a holy smokes, that's a great idea, let's paint all these rooms in Disney, right? So to the purpose of designs and 3D designs, it's all a question of how do you tie you know, the function and you know, really the value of designing things in that way so that you can model it out and tell the story around it. So anything that's going to demonstrate it in a way that adds value, people will be receptive to. And then you just have to, that's back to the ideation stage of how do you practice and then prototype what's going to work. What's question number 2? What outcomes? So back to Sarah, what outcomes would you be looking to gain from your customer journey map?
I think it's better predictability around our process so that we can better understand where we're investing our time and which customers and which customer groups are going to actualize.
Right.
yeah, I think that's pretty important. And then just improving our re-engagement rates. So we have a lot of people that play with us once or twice, and we want people to be staying connected to us long term, especially because that's our product lifespan is quite long. So people will often have our toys and keep playing, but we don't know about it. So having them continue to engage with us in some way, even if they're not making a second purchase.
Right. I'm super curious now to see what these toys are all about. That's not cool. And yes, just before we have 50 seconds here, but your first comment is an important one because I don't think we talked about it yet today. Journey mapping is a really great tool for recognizing where costs should be allocated. So I don't want to say it's a great cost cutting initiative, but it will show you where you're spending money that's not adding value to your customers, right?
Exactly.
And that's where CEOs get very excited of, oh, okay, all right, you know, if we're investing in all these areas and at the end of the day it's not contributing to you know, generating a positive emotional experience for a customer that's going to lead to repeat buying behavior, then you know what, let's try something different. Like, you know, the hot water with the rose petals that may have got Crystal excited, but if 99% of people don't care, then they can stop buying rose petals in bulk. You know, that kind of